Today, I'll be sharing my senior thesis, The Effects of Physical Activity on Gait and Cognition in Older Adults. My name is Gabriela Caruso, and my advisor is Dr. Martini, a part of the kinesiology department here at UMass and the Movement Neuroscience Lab. So today, I'll be going into my background, methods, results, and some conclusions. So for what initially manifests as a cognitive disorder, dementia eventually evolves into a mobility dysfunction where standing, balance, and gait can become affected. Despite a rapid anticipated increase in dementia cases over the next 30 years, pharmacological interventions continue to remain unclear. With our study, we wanted to explore a lifestyle modification that can improve overall brain health while addressing gait and cognition as a means of preventing dementia. More specifically, this project dives into the relationship between gait and cognition and how aging can negatively impact its ability to function efficiently and independently. In terms of brain health, the brain experiences a decline in neurochemicals as one ages. N-acetyl-aspartate, the most established in the literature, is closely associated with ATP production. A decline in N-acetyl-aspartate levels has been observed in aging adults. Brain atrophy leading to the loss of neurons and synapses can also contribute to this decline in neurochemicals, a process that is specifically accelerated in those with dementia. To counter this, physical activity has been introduced as a way to decrease mortality in older adults by helping those domains of interest. Research has established that physical activity can decrease the risk of cardiovascular diseases. However, it also has a suggestive role in the prevention of neurological disorders. Therefore, the purpose of the study is to identify the effects of physical activity on brain health, cognition, and gait in older adults. Aim 1 specifically seeks to determine if physical activity leads to differences in brain health in terms of metabolism. We would anticipate that those who are more physically active will have greater N-acetyl-aspartate levels than those who are less physically active. Other metabolites will be analyzed as exploratory variables. Further, we are determining if there are differences in gait and cognition among the three physical activity groups, anticipating that those who are less physically active will have slower gait speed and increased stride length variability when compared to those with an increased level of physical activity. In terms of cognition, we expect the lower physical activity group to have impaired executive function and memory. Executive function evidently plays a role in gait decline, as studies suggest it's important for routine gait in healthy adults. So moving on to the methods, 25 participants were recruited for this protocol. Participants were recruited through the university via social media pages and lab websites. Based on their step count per day, participants were split into 3 groups quantifying low, moderate, and high physical activity levels. All participants required an age range from 70 to 84 and an exclusion of any mobility and cognitive impairments. Once enrolled, participants engaged in day 1 data collection consisting of cognitive and mobility assessments. The cognitive tests included the flanker inhibitory control and attention test measuring executive function and attention. The list sorting working memory test measured working memory, and the CF comp test measured cognitive fluidity. These tests were administered via the NIH Cognitive Toolbox, and outcome variables focused on speed and accuracy. As for the mobility assessments, participants wore 6 wireless opal inertia sensors mounted on each wrist, sternarm, lumbar region, and each foot to quantify walking and turning. Participants then completed a 2-minute walk, which required an individual to walk back and forth, making 180-degree turns along a 7-meter walkway. Outcome variables included gait speed, stride length, and stride length variability. And here are an image of the sensors. At the end of day 1 data collection, participants were instructed on how to wear their active PAL activity monitor. Participants wore this monitor 24 hours per day for 7 consecutive days. This tracker allowed for steps per day to be collected along with stepping time per day, which correlated to the same thing. On the second day of data collection, participants returned their active PAL monitors after 8 to 10 days of gathering data and came in to receive their MRI and magnetic resonance spectroscopy scans. MRS is an MRI technique that is able to distinguish neurochemicals from each other. Here's an image on the screen. However, we are focusing on the frontal cortex, and here the visual cortex is highlighted. So this spectrum shows the concentration of those chemicals within the region of interest. Primary outcome variables here are the N-acetyl-aspartate levels. Moving on to the results. So going forward, a p-value of less than 0.05 conveyed statistical significance. So 15 participants were female while 10 were male. The key exposure here was steps per day and was divided into 5,500 for the low physical activity group, 5,500 to 10,000 steps for the moderate, and greater than 10,000 steps per day signified the high physical activity group. So one way ANOVA tests were run to reveal statistical significant differences for the cognitive and mobility data. So no statistically significant differences were found for the list sorting working memory test, and same for the flanker inhibitory attention test, and same for the CF comp. As for the mobility data, no statistical differences were observed for gait speed, stride length, or stride length variability. Although gait speed followed anticipated trend where physical activity, the high physical activity group had the fastest gait speed and the low had the slowest, there was still no significant difference. Moving on to the MRS data, the N-acetyl levels resulted in no statistical differences. Interestingly, the GLX ratio, which is the combination of glutamate and glutamine concentrations, served as an exploratory variable where a post-Hoch-Tukey test revealed statistical significant differences among the moderate and high physical activity groups. So this was an interesting and unexpected finding. Lastly, an independent sample t-test was run to compare the two extreme groups, the low and high physical activity. When comparing these two groups alone, gait speed and stride length did become statistically significantly different. And now I'm going to expand on these findings in the next slide. So overall, physical activity did not reveal significant differences among the three groups. We cannot say that an increase in physical activity, specifically more steps per day, contributes to improved cognition and/or gait performance for this specific sample population. There are some associations that suggest brain health may be improved by more steps per day, however, not in terms of N-acetyl levels, but glutamate has glutamine concentrations. So the difference between the low and moderate groups was not statistically significantly different, which could have impacted the outcome of our results. There is no clear consensus on the amount of steps per day that make up a low versus moderate physical activity level in the literature. Some sources suggest that 5,000 to 7,599 steps per day is considered low physical activity. However, this range was grouped into more of the moderate physical activity group when compared to the rest of the distribution for the purpose of this study. It was important to have a moderate physical activity group to avoid having just comparisons of the extreme ends. However, more defined boundaries should have been created for future perspectives. More statistically significant results were demonstrated when the low and high physical activity groups were compared alone, as physical activity played a more dramatic role in this evaluation. It is important for future studies to create clear boundaries in the manipulation of physical activity for their participants. Future research should also explore the significance of the GLX ratio and the effects physical activity can have on glutamate and glutamine concentrations. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation today.